Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week I'm joined by a guest to talk about a Disney Plus offering of their choosing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, so if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal, we understand. The fact that you're listening is awesome, and of course, we would like it if you like, subscribe, rate, review the podcast, and share it with your friends. Joining me today, we have Logan Wilkinson back on the show. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today, Trev?
I'm doing all right. We're recording this on early on a Saturday morning. It is the first night this last week that I did not let my sleep schedule get completely screwed up, because I've just been falling into this terrible habit during all this quarantine stuff where I'm up until 4 or 5 in the morning, and it has not been the best for my sleep habits. So I actually got a good night's sleep, so I could be up bright and early to record with you this morning. Mm-hmm. So the the movie we're going to be talking about today is WALL-E, which, as I understand, you just watched for the first time in the last week or so. So yeah. I'll toss it over to you to pick, I guess, why you recently kind of watched it and why you wanted to talk about it for this week's episode.
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of a two-pronged answer. The first one is I've always wanted to watch WALL-E, right? I feel like in kind of the pantheon of Pixar movies, whenever people talk about what the best possible one is, WALL-E's always kind of brought up. It's always mentioned as this kind of amazing, beautiful film. I've seen clips of WALL-E before, but watching the whole thing, surprisingly few. So I knew that I would enjoy it, and it was I feel like it's always been a movie where I knew if I actually just sat down and watched it, I would really like it. I just never got around to sitting down and watching it. And then my girlfriend has been on she loves Pixar movies, and so she's on a big kick of us watching a bunch of Pixar movies. Earlier we watched Ratatouille, for which we will not be doing a podcast. But
we can do that one down the line, though.
Yeah,
'cause that's one I've been wanting to go back and watch.
I'd be curious.
You do not? That's right. You mentioned some comments in the I think our Slack or something that you were not as hot on that as somebody like Ben is, who I think that's one of Ben's favorites.
Yeah, I don't think Wally's bad. Yeah,
Ratatouille. You mean?
Yeah, or Ben. Yeah, I don't think Ratatouille's bad. I just think that I like it less than a lot of other people. But WALL-E was one for me where, so I'd always wanted to watch it, and then Shrav was really insistent on being hey, let's check this movie out. I'm all right, I'm excited to. And so then getting to sit down and watch it, I guess I shouldn't be, because it's Pixar and peak Pixar, but it blew me away. It's so good. It's very beautiful. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk about it.
All right, great. It'd been a while since I watched it myself. We'll get into that in a little bit. So a little bit of the history lesson on WALL-E for you. Originally released June 27th, 2008. Other notable releases at the time, you had earlier that month on June 6th, you had Kung Fu Panda came out in the animated space.
A good
movie. This is 2 weeks after The Incredible Hulk, the second movie of the MCU, came out, which
less of a good movie.
Less of a good movie as well, yeah. But also thinking of this in the context of the beginning days of the MCU feels like a lifetime ago. You had one of an underrated classic that I enjoyed, and not classic at all, I guess. Get Smart with Steve Carell and The Rock and Anne Hathaway.
I love Get Smart, actually. That's one of my favorite.
I really enjoyed that movie, especially having grown up with the original show on Nick at Night when I was a kid. Watching that all the time. I really enjoyed what Steve Carell and that was one of those early movies where I was The Rock is a really funny guy when he gets the opportunity to be just a comedic actor. It came out alongside The Love Guru, Mike Myers, one of the notoriously worst movies that definitely came out that year. So both those came out on June 20th, a week before this. This came out alongside the movie Wanted, which was a comic book adaptation featuring James McAvoy and Angelina Jolie. If I remember correctly, that's the one where they turned the bullet.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman is also in it.
Yeah. And it's even thinking about that, I'm remembering specifically when this came out, I was working at the Santa Fe Opera in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I remember that specifically because I remember seeing those Wanted commercials all the goddamn time when I was watching like American Ninja Warrior or something in the like dorm housing we had for my summer working for the Santa Fe Opera. So I probably saw this movie while I was in Santa Fe as well. And then you also have Hancock came out a week later, which I pulled in here just because I happened to watch Hancock like a week or two ago on HBO because I was just looking for something to do, and I was like, Hancock, I remember enjoying that and hadn't seen it in a while.
Can I just I just want to say for Hancock, I don't love Hancock or anything. I don't know how many people do. But I've always respected Hancock because it's such a weird and different superhero like esque movie. Like it's just like there's nothing really like Hancock, and also like it's just kind of a bummer all the way through, and like they don't ever really try to like make it not that. And like I just kind of enjoy its very different like superhero energy and vibes.
Yeah, I had completely forgotten that like one of like the early character beats of that is him throwing a child miles into the air because the kid kept calling him an asshole.
Yeah.
The little French kid kept calling him an asshole or whatever it was. I was just like, oh yeah, I did not remember this movie. But yeah, it was again like thinking of that even in the context of like early MCU. Like it's like wow, superhero movies have come a ways in the last 12 years. And then lastly, I pulled in here Journey to the Center of the Earth, kind of also in this like children's space here that came out July 11th. Had a runtime of an hour and 38 minutes, and then in the Disney/Pixar timeline of things specifically, this came out between the aforementioned Ratatouille, which had come out about a year earlier, June 29th, 2007, and it came out before Up, May 29th, 2009.
My favorite Pixar movie.
Your favorite Pixar movie, Up, yeah. So like when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is like, yeah, this was still that like golden era of Pixar where they weren't hitting, you know, every other movie was a sequel or something like that. It was or still prequel, like original stuff. So yeah, really cool stuff there. The roll call for the film, who's who of it. You had director Andrew Stanton, who had previously been a co-director of A Bug's Life, as well as the director of Finding Nemo. And then he went on to direct, and this is kind of a callback to last week's episode where Cameron and I had a spin-off tangent talking about John Carter for a while, but Andrew Stanton was the ultimate director of John Carter, because Cameron went off about how John Carter was originally going to be done by Jon Favreau, and when we were talking about Jon Favreau in the Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian show last week. So just seeing that, I was like, oh, well, I definitely have to pull in any John Carter references we're going to get into this episode. Andrew Stanton would also go on to direct Finding Dory, as well as a couple episodes of Stranger Things and an episode of Better Call Saul. But he has very much mostly been like Pixar through and through. As for the three credited writers on the film, Andrew Stanton was one of them, who, again, in addition to writing and co-directing A Bug's Life, has written on all of the Toy Story films. He also wrote Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, and then he would go on to do John Carter, Finding Dory, and most recently Toy Story 4 was his last writing credit there. Pete Docter also wrote on Toy Story 1 and 2, as well as Monsters, Inc., and then he would go on to write Up, Inside Out, and then he is one of the credited writers for the upcoming Soul whenever we get that one. And then lastly, Jim Reardon, which is different from the Jim Reardon of Percy Jackson fame, wrote 19 episodes of Mighty Mouse back in the day, as well as 16 episodes of Tiny Toon Adventures, which was a staple of my childhood growing up. Before going off and being an associate director over on The Simpsons for a few seasons. He did 34 episodes with The Simpsons, and then basically left The Simpsons to come work on this film, was one of the bits of trivia that's in there. And then he had a pretty wide gap between stuff, only recently coming back and doing writing on Wreck-It Ralph, Zootopia, and Ralph Breaks the Internet. So kind of making the transition from Pixar over to Disney animated these days. As far as your starring, you have as Wally and Mo and most of the robots, you have the incomparable Ben Burt, the iconic sound designer behind Star Wars elements like R2-D2's voice, the lightsaber hum, blasters, and Darth Vader's breathing. He also, I thought this was a cute little trivia thing, he also popularized the Wilhelm scream as an in-joke on the Star Wars films, Indiana Jones, and then a lot of like Disney Pixar stuff. And then he most recently voiced BD-1 in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. So yeah, kind of just Ben Burt being one of them iconic sound engineers in the industry, if not the most iconic. You also had Alyssa Knight as Eve, who is an assistant producer at Pixar, and so she's not a voice person by trade, but mostly kind of steps in and fills in for stuff. So she's also done voices in Cars, Monsters University, and Inside Out. Jeff Garlin as the captain. Had done a ton of stand-up in Second City, and then he kind of made his break, I guess, a little bit on Mad About You for a few seasons, which I saw like a couple times recently. I've seen Mad About You come up, and I'm like, I remember watching that show as a kid. I could not tell you a damn thing about that show outside of it being like Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt.
Yeah.
I don't remember what like the core premise of their relationship was.
I know they had like a reboot like a year ago, though.
Did they?
Yeah, well, not a reboot, but like a Boy Meets the World kind of thing, where like they brought it back like 20 years later.
Oh, okay. He also, of course, is probably most known these days for stuff like Curb Your Enthusiasm or The Goldbergs, but he also joined the Toy Story franchise in Toy Story 3, playing Buttercup, which I believe is the unicorn in the little girl's like toys collection of toys. You had Fred Willard as the first, and I think still so far only, live-action performance in a Pixar film, playing Shelby Forthright, the by and large like president. He was, of course, a regular in Christopher Guest mockumentaries like Best in Show and A Mighty Wind. He was in Anchorman, and he will be, despite unfortunately passing away here a week or so ago, he will be in the upcoming Space Force series, at least the first season with Steve Carell on Netflix. And yeah, he unfortunately passed away on May 15th, right before we're recording this episode. And so when you reached out about wanting to do Wall-E, I was like, oh, is he like tying it in, or was Logan a super Fred Willard fan and just wanted to sit down and watch this because he'd never seen it or not? But I imagine
I do love
completely
Fred
unrelated. Yeah, he was great. I recently have been recently rewatched all of Community, and one of my favorite little gags in that series is that he came in and played like Pierce, the Chevy Chase character, as like a when in like Abed has, I think, a fantasy about the show within the show, or the study group being a TV show within the TV show, because Abed was, of course, the most meta character ever put on screen. And they brought in Fred Willard and basically had him playing Chevy Chase, because nobody really liked Chevy Chase at that point. Anyway, rest in peace, Fred Willard.
Absolutely.
He's a lot of fun in this film. And then rounding out this cast as John and Mary, respectively, we have John Ratzenberger, kind of the iconic good luck charm of Pixar, who has done a voice in every Pixar film, and then was, of course, on Cheers from 82 to 93. And then playing Mary, you have Kathy Najimy, who kind of made her breakout roles in the Sister Act films, and then Hocus Pocus. So she had she had a good few years there, and then was Peggy Hill on King of the Hill for many, many years. And then, I guess, lastly, I missed this. Lastly, you have Sigourney Weaver playing the voice of the ship's computer, who, of course, iconic from Alien and Ghostbusters. And I threw this in here thinking at the time it was the Aaron Sorkin one. And I was like, wait, no, American President was the Aaron Sorkin one, but she was in the other presidential movie of the time, Dave. So I pulled that in here specifically for you, and then realized, like, right before we started recording, I was like, oh, no, that's the wrong one. But it's still in there for you,
Kevin Kline,
Logan. Yeah, Kevin Kline as Dave. And then, of course, you did Galaxy Quest, where, one of the little bits of trivia is this is Sigourney Weaver's third time playing, like, basically a ship's voice, because in Galaxy Quest, her whole role as, like, her character was to just repeat whatever the ship said. And then also in Futurama, she in an episode of Futurama, she played the voice of the ship for an episode. And then, of course, she was in Avatar, the first one, and then she is in Avatar 2 and 3, which are, according to IMDb, in the filming stages, and credited in Avatar 4 and 5, which are, according to IMDb, in the pre-production stages.
Yeah,
so
okay.
We'll see when any of those come out. A little bit of trivia to go along with all this. To explore the possibilities of pure visual storytelling, Andrew Stanton and the Pixar team watched every single Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton movie, both short films and features, every day during lunch for about 18 months.
Incredible.
This is the first Pixar film to be nominated for 6 Academy Awards. This ties it with the only other animated film to garner this many nominations. I imagine this is still the case, but this was as of whenever this little bit of trivia was written. And the only other animated film to do so was Beauty and the Beast from 1991. Alyssa Knight originally recorded Eve as a stand-in scratch track, but Andrew Stanton liked her performance so much that he kept her in the final film, which is why, again, she wasn't like a known actor or anything like that. Little abbreviations. WALL-E stands for Waste Allocation Load Lifter Earth Class, and EVE stands for Extraterrestrial Vegetation Evaluator. Both are mentioned in the movie, but they're very easy to miss. Most of the robots are voiced by Ben Burtt through mechanical sounds of his creation. He recorded 2,500 different sounds for the film, twice the average of a Star Wars movie, and also the most that Burtt had ever recorded for one feature film. His involvement with the film lasted for 2 years, and when Andrew Stanton had met with Burtt to pitch the idea of him working on the film, he told him, "I need you to be 80% of my cast." Here's a little bit of a long one, but the musical theater nerd in me loves it. Director Andrew Stanton explained why he used excerpts from Hello, Dolly in an interview. "When I got to Hello, Dolly and played Put On Your Sunday Clothes, at that first phrase, out there, came out. It just fit musically, and I finally realized, you know what? This song is about 2 guys that are just so naive. They've never left a small town, and they just want to go out to the big city for one night and kiss a girl. That's my main character." And then my co-writer, Jim Reardon, said, "You know what? He could actually discover an old tape in the trash, and that's how he got inspired by it. And it's a great way to show that he's got a romantic slant." So we started looking at the movie, and when I found the other song, It Only Takes a Moment, and saw the 2 lovers holding hands, I realized that's a perfect way for my main character to express the phrase, "I love you," without being able to say it. The vacuuming robot that follows WALL-E and Eve has a robotic version of the song Put On Your Sunday Clothes, the first 2 lines of the song's chorus in electronic form. And Stanton had portrayed Barnaby Tucker in a 1980 high school production of the musical. Jerry Herman allowed his songs to be used in the film without fully realizing how or why. When he saw how they worked in the final film, he claimed it was genius. And then, similar on that note, the production actually had to cheat on the shot from Hello, Dolly, which features the lovers holding hands. In the original 1969 film, there is no close-up shot of this hand-holding, so Pixar was permitted to take the original film element and go a little bit tighter on it, just to really kind of drive that home. Otto's, here we dive into the, Pixar Easter egg portion of the Easter eggs here. Otto's secret directive A113 is an ongoing in-joke in Animation Room A13. A113 was a classroom at Cal Arts where many Disney and Pixar animators learned their craft. Number A113 appears in all of the Pixar animated films and in many Disney animated films as well. This is the first Pixar film in which A113 is relevant to the plot. One of the trucks that Eve searches is the Pizza Planet delivery truck from Toy Story, which has been also featured in all of the Toy Story films. And then one of the things that I love that Pixar does is they hide kind of an Easter egg for the next movie in every current movie. And so as a tease for Up, the walking cane that Carl Fredricksen uses has a cameo twice in WALL-E. Once sitting behind the iPod when WALL-E is about to pull out the little magnifying screen to watch Hello, Dolly. And then once WALL-E collides with the cane when falling from the ceiling of his truck after being knocked over there by Eve. Speaking of the little iPod there, film contains numerous references to Apple computers. When WALL-E is fully charged by the sun, he makes the same boot-up sound that most Macintosh computers have made since 1996. WALL-E watches his favorite movie every night on the screen of an iPod. again magnified. The villainous autopilot's voice is provided by Apple's text-to-speech system, Macintalk, which I imagine these days would be Siri. They would have probably had Siri voice it. Eve's sleek design is an evolution of Wall-E's, parallels the sleek iMac design Apple computer. And Apple, of course, was sorry, I skipped a line in my note here. Steve Jobs was the founder, chairman, and CEO of Apple, as well as the CEO of Pixar until its acquisition by Disney in 2005. And he was a shareholder and member of Disney board of directors, actively involved with the company until his death in 2011. And then Eve specifically was co-designed by Apple's senior vice president of industrial design, Jonathan Ive, the man responsible for many of the Apple devices. And then lastly, here in the trivia section, concept for WALL-E evolved from a now famous lunch that took place between John Lasseter, Pete Docter, and Joe Ranft in 1994. Toy Story was nearing completion, and the writers sat down to brainstorm ideas for the next projects. And out of that lunch was born WALL-E, as well as 1998's A Bug's Life, 2001's Monsters, Inc., and 2003's Finding Nemo. Stanton and Docter outlined the film before Toy Story was completed, but production would not resume until Stanton completed Finding Nemo in 2003. So, just thinking of getting together for a lunch with friends and knocking out 4 iconic films in Pixar's long legacy of stuff. Just being like, yep, here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea, and here's an idea. I think even Up was briefly kind of pitched at that lunch, if I recall correctly. I think that was the last idea out of that lunch that really kind of fully came to fruition. Let's dive into how does this movie from 2008 hold up here, Logan? What'd you think of it coming to it for the first time?
I mean, I think WALL-E's fantastic, right? I think what I said in the moment after it flicked off and I had to kind of compose what I thought my thoughts were is that only Pixar, I feel like, could deliver one of the most beautifully told love stories with almost no dialogue at all. And also featuring not human characters. I think it's just such a well-crafted, well-told love story between Wall-E and Eve. I think Wall-E to me is such a instantly classic character in the Pixar kind of iconography, and he's one who I don't know, nobody can possibly watch this movie and not fall in love with Wall-E. I feel like he's just so goofy and charming and silly. He's so earnest. He's a very Logan character, I will acknowledge, but one that I immediately fell for. And then low key, I actually love all the stuff they do with the humans too. I don't know, you see a lot of, I think, what's kind of crummy about people, but you also see a lot of what makes us so cool, and the captain, and then in John and Mary, and their own kind of burgeoning love story, and kind of waking up to everything, the excitement on the captain's face where he asks what is earth and what is dirt and what is dancing, and how he just gets more and more excited to just kind of learn these things. I don't know, I think every facet of the movie is just handled so well that I was kind of blown away by it.
Yeah, I remember loving it at the time, and I continue to love it. The little kind of social commentary that Pixar is making on the human condition and how easily we've become complacent and stuff like that, and we've only just gotten more so in the last 12 years, with more and more screens in front of our faces and stuff. And so I love that the character awakenings in this are when screens are pulled away from their faces, or when something kind of interrupts their routine. But other than that, it's not that they're having a bad routine. Everybody on that ship is super happy and they're leading a good life. They just I love the idea that it is those people just kind of turned into amorphous blobs over the course of some 700-800 years or 700 years, traveling out in space and kind of just varying generations, and you might suffer some bone loss or something like that, bone density loss, and that kind of explains why they've become more gelatinous ball-obby kind of thing. One of the little trivia bits is that a lot of like the early story ideas it didn't feature humans so much as like aliens, but they ultimately kind of like reined it in and kind of made it a more human story, or human bee story. And they ultimately landing on like the big baby idea that they ultimately did. And yeah, like I enjoyed that element of it, and I think yeah, specifically coming back to it all these years later, like that still holds just as true. The like rampant consumerism leading to like the waste and destruction of the earth, and especially weirdly seeing it in the context of the quarantine, where like we've seen very visually over the last couple months with, you know, like how much cleaner LA looks when it's not covered in like the daily traffic of LA, and I've seen it here in Phoenix too. Like every day driving downtown, I have this this hill I can kind of go over, and I can look down at downtown Phoenix, and I can usually see like a layer of like brown blech, just because the valley here is the valley in Phoenix, because we're surrounded by mountains, so like wind doesn't really blow through a lot of that smog and dissipate it. So like driving over that hill during these couple months when I've gone out, like on the rare occasion I've gone out, I can look down and just see Phoenix, downtown Phoenix, like very like clear as day. And so the idea that like, oh yeah, we do this to ourselves, we're doing this to ourselves, we're ruining everything, and then like just the idea that also like pretty much everything is owned by and large in the in this like future, you know, your Walmart-esque stand-in kind of go buy everything here. I enjoyed that as somebody who has formerly worked for the Walmart Corporation during my years as a Sam's Club employee. I can appreciate that. Like, yeah, if a company were going to do it, it's going to be Walmart or it's going to be Amazon. And there's your by and large in the real world sense. So yeah, I think the film still holds up absolutely in terms of that messaging. But then yeah, as just as a very beautiful film and a beautiful, like, for most intents and purposes, like silent picture, effectively. Little silent love story that you get there. You get a lot of great little humor, comedic bits, as well as just a compelling narrative, with kind of everybody real, like we talked a few weeks back when we did Onward, how one of the great little themes of that film is that as these kids go on a magical quest, they bring a little bit of magic back into the lives of all the people they interact with. And WALL-E is very much the same way. Like that, this is another example of Pixar doing that kind of thing, where like everybody WALL-E meets and interacts with, be it the other robots or the humans on the ship or Eve, obviously, like he sparks something new in them and breaks them out of their routine, and leads them to like a more fun life. Or even Mo, who like is constantly having to like take the foreign contaminant off of the world, like it breaks him off of his beaten path, and I love kind of that element to this, like how, you know, one character can kind of go in and change so many lives and touch so many lives. So yeah, let's dive into some favorite moments. So I'll throw it to you first, Logan. Hit me with some of your favorite moments from this film, again, as a first-time watcher.
I have 4 down that I kind of jotted down, and the first one is an easy one, which is just the incorporation and just the Hello Dolly moments, right? Like, I think works so well in how they tie into the movie, both at the beginning and kind of throughout after that point. In particular, WALL-E watching it with Eve for the first time and him trying to like get closer and hold her hand and her reactions, and it is like a classic slapstick comedy scene, and done so well, and it's such a like such a brilliant, I think, usage of this kind of classic piece of music in a way that you never, I feel like, would have envisioned it in a Pixar movie working so well, and it just does, and it vibes as WALL-E so much. Another one I have that I've already kind of mentioned is I really do love the captain just Googling everything about Earth. Like just his first question, like, what is Earth? And then from that point onwards, that whole kind of like scene and him just getting more and more excited, where it just builds up to like, what is dancing? And him being like, I know this is dancing. Like at the end, like, I don't know, like it's such a, I think, gleefully like joyous thing of just like the sensation of him just like learning more and more and more about like where they're all from. And so I really loved that. Possibly my favorite scene in the movie, or certainly up there, is Wally and Eve after Wally gets kind of jettisoned into space.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the most iconic ones out of this film.
Yeah, and then he obviously kind of has a fire extinguisher and like rescues himself, whatever, and then him and Eve essentially like dancing through space. It is just beautiful, because it's also that moment of like when they are very much like, all right, like we love each other kind of thing now, and it's beautiful. It's so well done, like visually. I have like very few words for it. Like in terms of, like, I think the history of Pixar movies, really just the history of animation. Like it is one of the most beautifully, I think, done like animated scenes I've ever seen. It's so well done. I'm not surprised to hear that it's like a classic scene from the film. It is, it's incredible.
That's definitely one that stands out for me in particular. So like both that, like the visuals of that as well as the music of that. It stands out for me in particular because in Disney California Adventure, their like big musical like water showcase spectacle, World of Color. It is for those that don't know, haven't seen it, it is basically similar to like Disneyland's Fantasmic. It is imagery and music from across the Disney kind of spectrum of films, performed on jets of water that are shooting out into the air. So the jets of water that are lit up in different ways and shoot in different ways become basically a projection screen that they project a lot of like classic Disney animation from. And I think of it as kind of a 2-act thing in that like there's a lot of they kind of like build to a crescendo, and then there's like a little pause, and then they like come back and like build to the finale.
Yeah.
And that sequence always kicks off the second act of the World of Color song. It like everything kind of goes down, and like the lights change, and then the water starts shooting up again, and you hear that little that very like synthy kind of track that happens with like the little just peppering of tones, and then you see Wally and Eve kind of dancing through the water basically, and it's taking that animation and putting it into that different context. And so it's just one of those like iconic for me as somebody who's gone to Disneyland, you know, a dozen times in the last few years or whatever. It's something that definitely jumps out as like oh right, I haven't watched WALL-E all that often, but I've seen that sequence so many times in recent years. And so like I love that they even recognize how beautiful and how just what an iconic little sequence that is to include in their kind of water spectacular at California Adventure. So that's like they're like, because the music from that sequence you hear at some point earlier in the film. I don't remember where it hit, but like I remember hearing that song, being like, oh, that's right, that song's from this movie, and immediately like that stuff from World of Color started like flooding back into my mind. I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be good. I can't wait till we get to that scene, especially. So yeah, that is absolutely a standout moment. So what's your last one?
My last one is just the ending in general, which I think is just like super beautiful. Both like, and I mean like the whole ending, like them like landing on the planet, all the humans kind of stumbling out and being like excited about the world, and then like Eve trying to like put Wally together, not recognizing him, and then it's like when they kind of like grab hands and touch heads that he kind of like comes alive, and like I think it's super beautiful.
Which was set up in that prior sequence.
Yes,
that's
it
where,
was.
like they have the little spark of a kiss or whatever, and that somehow transfers Wally's like circuitry consciousness into Eve, and then she is able to give it back to him at the end of the film.
And it's super beautiful. And then like going into the credits where it's like you can see them like rebuilding like society through like the first like plant that they like plant, and it's just everything about it is super beautiful. Like WALL-E to me, like you've already touched on the fact that it is kind of WALL-E himself as an individual, like coming into people's lives and changing them, and kind of making them see the world in a different way. But it's also, I think, a larger story of like kind of rejuvenation and kind of a rebirth of things, right? Like in a very literal sense, the world is being reborn, right? From like what we've kind of done to it, to kind of this first plant that's been like nurtured throughout the entire movie, it's kind of been fodder throughout the entire movie, and then it being planted leads to kind of life coming back to Earth, and kind of life come back to humanity in a way too, right? Like people have like an actual life again. It's not just kind of like this automatic thing to do on repeat for 700 years. And so I loved that aspect of the movie, and that kind of final payoff, like you see that it actually does kind of bring the world back to life. I thought it was a beautiful kind of final note to leave on as well.
Yeah, one of my other favorite elements is just the way that both Wally and Eve and Mo, like really all the robot characters, get to showcase like their personality. Obviously, we get like that. We get this like beautiful sequence to kind of introduce Wally in that he's this lone, like it's almost like I Am Legend-esque in that he's like clearly the only person left on this Earth. And one of the other little trivia notes out there was basically like when by and large realized that like it was a futile effort. And kind of like, so around the time that Fred Willard is recording the like, hey, autopilots, don't come back, don't come back for us. Turns out we were beyond repair. They shut down everything else. So it was supposed, like, the original idea of the mission was, in the 5-year, cruise or whatever they were doing, was that all of the robots were going to stay behind, clean up the mess, build them into all those like, trash towers, and then like humanity would come back. And they realized pretty quickly that there was just too much of that, and they weren't going to be able to get it done. And it was just, there was no point in doing that. So they basically deactivated all of the other robots, but for whatever reason, like Wally got missed, and so he never gets deactivated. And over the course of 700 years, becomes sentient, learns how to repair himself, all that stuff. And so I love that that's like, even though you don't get all of that like explicitly stated, you get enough of that like in the details of the world, and that he's he's got his little cockroach buddy, and he's he's going across the monorail tracks or whatever, and the cockroach is like shaking and vibrating off, and so he like sees a Wally unit with better treads and just replaces his treads, and just and we see of course the like him replace his eye, and then later his he's got basically all of his backup parts ready to go at any kind of moment's notice, which like even that like makes me think, oh, it's weird that like it's that idea of like, hey, if you've got a broom and you replace the head and you replace the handle, at what point is it like a different broom? At what point is like Wally a different Wally? And you see kind of by the end of the film, oh, with his computer chip, that would be the final touch, but because Eve had like his memories in backup or whatever, he's able to be restored. So I love how like Wally is introduced there, as like he's still going out and he's still doing his thing that he was designed and created to do. And then I love that Eve comes in, and like her personality, I love in that like she is. It's a weird parallel to make, but she's the Han Solo in that she does shoot first. And I love that like how she's out there scanning everything and not coming up with anything, and so she gets so frustrated, and she's like so eager to just shoot shit. Like when especially the moment where like she blows up the tanker, and then like just it does the domino of tankers, and she just like, that is all stemmed out of frustration of like, I can't find the thing I'm here to find. Fuck it, I'm just gonna shoot this thing. And we see a little bit of that when she's back on the ship too, and how she just kind of like reacts to like immediately ready to blow stuff up on a few different instances. And so I just love that like she has a temper, and that like they do such a great job like letting us know that with such economies of storytelling. And then also like the clean freak Mo, and just how like angry and annoyed he is to have to keep cleaning everything that Wally touches, but at the end of the day, like has finds a fondness for Wally as well.
Yeah.
Just yeah. So many like little great character personality moments shown in a very non-traditional sense.
Well, the thing for me too is that one of my favorite things about Wall-E is I think it's kind of its recurring theme of like hope too, and I think most Pixar movies like have a kind of an underlying theme of like hope within them. It's very prevalent, but I think Wall-E does it in one of my favorite ways, where it is this kind of weird role reversal where like the people are the ones who have given up hope, and Wall-E is just this lone droid who is like carrying out this hope of like falling in love. Like it's the robot that is the one who like is so passionate about love and is so gung-ho about love and like trying to find that love somewhere in the universe, not even the world. Whereas people have kind of given up hope of having any sort of regular life without even knowing it at this point. And it's kind of him bringing it back, right? And I think kind of bringing it back to other people as well. That I just, and then to where the point where like he's kind of like dying basically, but then that hope he's passed on to others leads him to kind of, in the case of people, literally stand up to try to help him out. And in Eve's case, like spark that in her, where she's this kind of hope of like some connection with Wall-E and wants to save him. Like I think how it handles this kind of idea of hope is, and love is one of my favorite features of the film, and it does it so well. And I think, again, I cannot stress enough the fact that this film is a Charlie Chaplin-esque, like, silent slapstick comedy film with such a big heart. And yeah, it just knocks out like so many different genres and themes and styles of movies and takes them all on and like smashes them all out of the park. Like it's just, yeah, it's such a well done film.
Yeah. And the to your like Charlie Chaplin touch point, yeah, the comedy in this is often just so well done with and it like they recognize, again, after watching silent films daily for 18 months, like they recognize that like Wall-E couldn't have been alone because you couldn't have had somebody to play off of, so he has his little cockroach buddy, and you get some like fun little comedic bits of that, be it in like Wall-E like being horrified when he accidentally runs over the cockroach, and then the cockroach just kind of like pops back up and is fine, and same when Eve just like tries to blast him, like you see how Wall-E reacts to like this one companion he has, and that has helped keep him sane more or less. Like it's his Wilson to Tom Hanks' Castaway, and then also just the cast of misfit characters in the like all of the like in for repair robots.
Yep.
Be it the makeup bot that just is putting crazy powder
Maybe
and
my
stuff
favorite,
on anything. You have the umbrella that just constantly like flips itself up, and then I love how like each of those like little traits also ends up coming to play in kind of the climax of the film, and you get to see like the massage bot that just like goes hard on like destroying all the security bots. Yeah, just so many like great little just one-off visual gag things that like they set up so that when they come back into play later, they're not coming out of nowhere. They were previously established characters, even if we just thought they were a joke character for like that one scene. So yeah, it's great getting to see how they really lean on all of the kind of necessary language of silent films to really help tell this story. It's interesting, like, because as I was watching it, I was thinking about this as well as the film that came out a few years later, The Artist, that ended up winning the Oscar that year, I believe. And I remember I've not gone back and watched The Artist in in 9 years, I guess. But I still have it. Like, I'm pretty sure I have it in my collection. And I just like I remember loving seeing that film in the theaters because it was such a throwback to kind of a classical era of filmmaking, and very much in the same way that this is. And yeah, to a point you brought up earlier, like only Pixar really could do it on this kind of scale and make this beautiful film. I mean, I guess I wouldn't say only Pixar, but like Pixar, I think is one of the, because like I could see especially now in the guy behind Your Name and a couple of the other stuff he's done. I see that there are visual storytellers out there that could absolutely do this in animation, but I think Pixar is certainly one of the ones on a big blockbuster level scale that could do it and do it well. So. Because like a lot of the shorts even that we get from them are this kind of storytelling where it's so often here's a 4 to 5 minute short film told completely as a silent film, and then this is just Pixar kind of stretching out that format and telling it over the course of a 98-minute movie. Yeah. So yeah, any other little favorite bits or highlights you want to shout out, or anything that stands out that you didn't like out of the film?
The biggest thing that I want to shout out that we haven't really touched on yet is just Wall-E doing the dance, like him getting like the trash can lid for the hat and doing reenacting. Was one of the sweetest things I've ever seen, and then him like doing the full performance for like Eve to get her involved too, and her just utter bewilderment is easily a highlight and like one of the sweetest moments I think I've seen in a Pixar movie. It is very, very great. In terms of the things I didn't like, I mean, like the only thing that really comes to mind are like two small things, and I don't know really how you would fix one, but I didn't need this movie to have a villain, really. Like, I didn't need, and like again, it's that weird thing of like how does the movie kind of resolve itself, but like I didn't really need the like autonomous like self-pilot system thing to like take over and all that kind of stuff. Like I could have just been like, all right, we're just gonna drive back to Earth now, and like kind of thing. Or like I recognize that there was like not really a climax in that regard, but
yeah,
that's a minor thing.
It kind of pulls out like a central like conflict of the film if you don't have somebody working against Wall-E.
But it just kind of felt like
if Eve was able to just kind of get there and drop the plant in, and then they go back to Earth, it kind of cuts out a good middle chunk of the film.
But yeah, I didn't. That's a kind of forgettable like villain, and I was like, all right, cool, whatever, fine, yeah. And then like Wall-E at the end when he's like dead, and like I think he stays like, I'm using air quotes here that nobody can see obviously, but like stays dead, quote unquote, like a half second too long, like they like fake his death, but otherwise like no, it's a fantastic film all the way through.
Yeah, one of where was it? I was gonna highlight a thing that is it's escaping me, so I lost it. There was like one more thing I wanted to give a shout out to, but I'm trying to think if I can pull it, if it'll come back to me, but no, it's not. Oh well. Yeah, it's like Wall-E's a great little film there. I think there's just so much fun and joy to it across the and it is like it's a brief story, especially in like the grand scheme of all these things. Oh, I remember what it was. So one of the other little highlights that I wanted to celebrate is I love that when Eve goes into like automatic shutdown mode, we still get to see how Wall-E like takes care of her in that time afterwards.
That's a great point.
And that could have just like been as a standalone for us. That could have been a thing for us to see. But the fact that like Eve gets to see that in like sleep mode, her security camera footage at near the end of the film. It's a great little moment for her to also kind of like realize, what a special little guy he is. Yeah. So that was just one other feature. In particular, I think like, and that speaks to kind of one of the themes of the film being like love can like conquer all even programming is one of the things that they wanted to kind of reinforce with that. So yeah, I think they did a very great job with it. And just a very charming little couple of characters here in Wall-E. So on a scale of A+ to F, what do you give it for the report card?
Yeah, I mean, I give it an A.
Yep.
I think Wall-E is fantastic. Like watching it, like it instantly shot up to where like it's probably my top 5 favorite Pixar movies. And in a year in which I've watched a lot of movies, it's easily right among the very, very top of films I've watched this year. Wall-E is fantastic, and more importantly, Wall-E himself as like a character now like leaped and bounded up to like my top like 2 or 3 favorite Pixar characters probably. Like I'd probably have it be Wall-E, Woody, and then Carl from Up. Like he's just such a like sweet embodiment of like what we should all kind of strive for in terms of just sort of, I think, his kindness and his empathy and his love and his hope. And yeah, Wall-E's phenomenal character, phenomenal film.
Yeah, he is a very little pure boy.
Yeah.
As you said, like a very Logan character. So I can appreciate that. All right. Yeah, I also give it an A. I think it is absolutely still all these years later a stellar thing. In part because it's not like it does this great thing where it's because it's not relying on like a like dialogue centric narrative or something like that. It kind of exists outside of time.
Yeah, it becomes a weirdly timeless movie.
And even with like, because one of the issues you often see is like anytime they kind of like propose future tech or something like that, it kind of immediately dates a thing. And there are elements of it where, yeah, like when the iPod popped up, I was like, oh yeah, iPods. I remember when those were a thing, 5 years ago or whatever it was. But still, like the like, because this is set in a future where it's looking back at our past, it's fine that like all of those things exist kind of moving forward out of time. So yeah, I think it will stand the test of time as a result of that. Like because it never needs to exist in the moment. It can always have existed in 2008 and be looking back on our past as a result. So yeah, very good movie here with Wall-E. A little bit of extra credit, other suggestions if you like this one. No surprise, it's going to be a whole bunch of Pixar films. You have Cars.
Good.
Which it's like, I'm surprised Cars is like the first pick that it gives you, because Cars notoriously one of the less revered of the Pixar films.
I think the first Cars is good though.
Yeah. You have The Incredibles. You have Brave, Ratatouille, which we mentioned earlier, not one of Logan's favorites. I really enjoy it, and that's one that I definitely want to go back and revisit sometime in the near future. You have very early Pixar in A Bug's Life.
Yeah.
You have Up there, Logan's favorite. You have the one Pixar movie that I still have not seen, The Good Dinosaur. Have you seen every other Pixar movie at this point?
Pretty sure. I mean,
have you watched the other Cars movies?
I know I've seen Cars 2, so I guess I haven't seen Cars 3. I haven't seen Good Dinosaur. Saw Coco, Brave. I think so. Yeah, I'm trying to think what's the last few year ones, but yeah.
Monsters University.
I did. We watched it recently. Yes, we did.
Okay, nice. I think we'll have to try and get a crew together to watch The Good Dinosaur for the first time here before too much longer. Because it's like that's one that came out and it was just like had so little like buzz and then like such a bad critical response. And it didn't help that came out like on the heel because of like delays and stuff. I would think that one came out on the heels of Inside Out, which I just loved and adored, and then was not. Like, I just didn't hear any good things about Good Dinosaur, so I was just like, oh, well, I don't want to go see a bad Pixar movie. And even a bad Pixar movie, I'm sure, is still better than like 90% of movies. But when you're expecting, creme de la creme, maybe skipping that one has not been terrible. And then rounding out the squad of 8 suggestions here, rounding out their MySpace 8, you have Toy Story,
which I think is the best Pixar movie still.
Oh, I thought you said Up was...
Up is my favorite. I recognize that Up is not necessarily the best. I think Toy Story is still pound for pound probably the best Pixar movie.
Okay.
And my second fave.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I'm one that at least up like 2 and 3. I think 2 is better than 1, and I think 3 is better than 2. Personally, I think Toy Story is certainly like iconic, but the fact that like Woody is the bad guy for almost that entire film, I'm just like, I don't like Woody in this at all. So it's increasingly harder to go back to.
You can see all of our thoughts on Pixar in Review coming soon.
Yeah, there you go. So lastly, extracurriculars. Anything else you've been watching on Disney Plus there, Logan?
So I'm going to cheat and say me and Trav have been watching all of the Indiana Jones movies, which are not on Disney Plus.
I also went through. I did not rewatch Temple of Doom, but I went through and watched the other Indiana Jones movies. Yeah, on Netflix, not Disney Plus.
Not on Disney Plus, technically, even though they're owned by it's a whole thing. But
they'll be on Disney Plus eventually, I'm sure.
I think it's 2021 is what I read their like Netflix deal ends at, and so I imagine after that. But they're fantastic, and again, Indiana Jones is one of my favorite film series of all time, anyway. So it was fun going through those with Shrob, who's never really seen them. Again, watching Raiders of the Lost Ark. We watched Temple of Doom, which is my least favorite of the 3. It's also her least favorite of the 3. She had thoughts on some of their India takes, I can assure you. Shout out to Monkey Brains. But it's still good. It's still fun. And then my favorite Indiana Jones movie, Last Crusade, which very much I think still holds up.
Yeah, that was the first one I watched. And then
so good.
I think so I watched that one and I was like, I don't want to watch Temple of Doom because I never liked that one. And then I was like, I think I'm gonna watch Crystal Skull just to see if it's as bad as I remember it being. Yes, it's still as bad as I remember it being, if not worse so. But at the same time, as they're talking about doing an Indiana Jones 5, I'm like, with how Shia LaBeouf has like rebounded in the last year, I would not be mad at seeing him come back, and seeing how they try and like tell that story, because that was like supposed to be the handoff, and then it just got so badly panned. But it's like just watching that one, I was just like, why did people say yes to all these things? Like, did we learn nothing from the prequels? That was a rough one. And then I went and watched Raiders of the Lost Ark too.
It's funny for me. We could do a whole other podcast, Indiana Jones, but it's funny to me. I'll just say, for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because it is, again, I've mentioned before, like it might legitimately be the movie that I've seen the most in a movie theater. Like I saw that movie probably like 5 or 6 times in like a 2.5 week stretch, because it was that weird thing
that also came out this summer.
It did. Yes, it did.
Of WALL-E.
Yeah,
I remember seeing that one.
Yeah,
I
sure do too. Because I was wondering, again, me and my dad watched it, I think, like opening night or the night after, and then all of my friends wanted to watch it, but we all wanted to watch it like individually, so I had to keep going to the movie again and again and again. And like, again, I love Indiana Jones, so I wasn't like that upset. And like, I think I always kind of like slightly like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull a little bit more than most people, just because like I can see the good movie in it. Like I think the first 2 acts of the movie are like all right. It's like the last act where they go like full alien, where I'm like, I don't need this noise in my life. But it's not great. But yeah, Last Crusade is still fantastic, and it's such again like the fact that we only ever got one movie with Sean Connery and Harrison Ford together is a tragedy. Their chemistry is so good. And yeah, so we watched all of that, and then this weekend, as we're recording it, actually, we are gonna have a Star Wars trilogy time. We're starting tomorrow. We're gonna watch all 3 of the original trilogy films over the course of this kind of 3-day weekend. So we're gonna do either 1 or 2 tomorrow, and then the ones we haven't watched on Monday. And so those are on Disney Plus, so they count, and it'll be her first time watching them. So it'll be very, very fun.
Interesting. Yeah, has she watched any of the Star Wars?
So
she's watched the new ones, right?
Yeah, she's watched Rise of Skywalker with me, and she saw it before that with her brother, and then I think she's seen 7. And then we watched about half of Phantom Menace on TV together like a month or 2 ago. But otherwise, we've seen The Mandalorian, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. We talked about this a lot last week. I don't know if you even caught wind of any of this stuff, but I'd be curious your thoughts on it. Did you see the clip going around of Dave Filoni kind of talking about Duel of the Fates?
I
a couple weeks
did.
ago?
I did. I think we talked briefly about this. I think, yeah, I have thoughts. I mean, look, I'm not opposed. I mean, again, I like the prequels. I think they're fine. Like, they're not the greatest thing ever, but they're not as bad as people think they are. So, like, I'm here for him trying to make them better. It's not what the movie was, I think, really kind of doing. And again, I've mentioned before the fact that, like, I think Qui-Gon is, like, okay and fine, but just like Boba Fett, like, I think the people who are like, Qui-Gon's, like, the most important character in the prequels, it's like, you watching different series than I am watching, is all I'll say. It's kind of my concise.
Yeah, that was my thoughts last week that Cam and I went into were, like, the way Dave Filoni describes Qui-Gon in that sequence, great. The Qui-Gon we actually got in that film, not that at all. The Qui-Gon we got was a zealot obsessed with a prophecy, not somebody looking to be a father figure to this kid.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just like that's yeah. But at the same time, it's like I would like to I would almost like somebody to remake the prequel trilogy with kind of the all of the things that they learned from doing the Clone Wars series, and like diving more deeply into a lot of those characters. I would love to see kind of what that level of storytelling would be, just as a curious thought exercise, like what that would look like in a new world. But at the same time, who knows? Because clearly the whole series is about Palpatine now.
Oh my God! Don't even. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, we'll do a Star Wars interview, I'm sure someday.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch them. Again, I haven't seen 4, 5, and 6 in 3 years. I usually again, how much about the classic thing. Every 3 years, I have a trilogy time and watch them all in one weekend, and so that'll be what I'm doing this weekend. So I will let you know my thoughts on 4, 5, and 6. Also, it's like the 40th anniversary of Empire. It's a perfect time to do it. So
it is, yeah. That was that Twitter trend hit this last week. I mean, even for just that Disney Plus show, that D Plus show, like it's probably about time we dive into a Star Wars proper thing. We did an arc of the Clone Wars a while back, and then obviously last week's like behind the scenes on the Mandalorian stuff. But yeah, it'd be fun to get a few of us together and sit down and do a D Plus show just over like a New Hope to start, and then kind of go from there. So yeah, we'll see if we can put that together here in the next, I don't know, few weeks or whatever. That's going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Logan, for joining me to talk about WALL-E here. It was lovely sitting back down and rewatching that last night.
Yeah.
I had weirdly after like I spent most of my evening playing Maneater, which is the new
absolutely
shark RPG game that came out yesterday. I was like, oh crap, I still got to watch WALL-E. So I just kind of like sat down, shut that off, and then threw on WALL-E, and I was like, God, this is just such a delightful movie. So thank you for picking that one, and so we could sit down and discuss it. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to plug or shout out, Logan?
Yeah, you can catch the newest episode of That News You Care About from last week, in which myself and Trevor were joined by Jarrett Green from Irrational Passions. I thought it was a lot of fun. Jarrett is very wise, and I always enjoy getting to talk to him about games and really just everything in general. And then look forward to this week's episode. These go live on Monday?
This goes live Tuesday.
Yeah, so the day after you listen to this, there'll be a new episode of that show as well for you to look up to. And then, yeah, just stay tuned to all things That Nerdy Site.
Cool. Yeah, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and I will kind of echo the sentiment there of check out our newest podcast in our ever-growing podcast universe, That News You Care About, where Logan and I sit down each week and talk about video game news, kind of the biggest stories of the week. It's for as many of us that came together from like the video game space, the fact that this is our first like dedicated video game show of our now 6 podcasts. Well, I guess like Video Game List Show is a dedicated video game show, but it's not like not talking about current games or anything like that. So yeah, this is our kind of answer to your Games Daily or your Gamescast podcast kind of things out there. So yeah, check that out. You can follow all of us and all of the newest news from That Nerdy Site over at That Nerdy Site on Twitter or thatnerdysite.com. And if you would like to be on this show, you can go to thatnerdysite.com/D+guest and fill out a little Google form there to let me know what Disney Plus offering you would like to hop on and chat about. If you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Thank you, Logan, for joining me to talk about WALL-E here. It was a pleasure catching up with you and chatting with you about it.
Always is.
It always is. And as always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.